Christmas. The lights, Santa Claus, the snow, the Christmas tree, the dinner with family members you didn't even know existed. It's a time of joy, solidarity and the exchange of gifts. Celebrating the birth of the sun. Of Jesus. Jesus was definitely born in winter, but we'll talk about that later, because the winter solstice has a beautiful history. Festivities that stretch from ancient summer through Persia, Rome, Germanic and Scandinavian tribes, all the way to the United States of America. So now it's time to talk about that history. Ancient winter solstice celebrations and the annual renewal festivals of Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cultures created ritual traditions that later on Christianity would reinterpret as Christmas, because celebrating the 20-something of December goes back to the first half of the 3rd millennium BC. The Sumerians recorded the day when the sun was lowest in the sky during midday, furthest to the south, and when the night was at its longest, the darkest day of the year. Basically when they noticed that the sun stopped sinking lower on the horizon each day. The Sumerian festival of Sakmuk took place shortly afterwards, between the 23rd and 27th of December, celebrating the beginning of the year with a grand ritual of restoring cosmic and political order. The earliest evidence of this celebration comes from around the 26th century BC, but it was probably celebrated even earlier than that. The festival took on a ritual of renewal after the symbolic defeat of the forces of chaos, mainly darkness and night, celebrating the fact that the sun was indeed rising again, and that all of the offerings and prayers they did for the entire year had actually worked. It was the first iteration of a winter festival of joy and warmth. Early Babylon inherited the Sumerian festival of Sakmuk, and from 1600 to 539 BC, before Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon, it became the Akitu festival, celebrated in spring for around 12 to 16 days. The festival was revived in the modern era after the First World War by largely Christian, Assyrian and Chaldean communities, descendants of the Assyrians and of the last Babylonian dynasty, respectively, in Iraq, the Levant, Iran and even within diasporas in the United States. It is celebrated in March with the purpose of paying respect to their ancestors, and honestly I will also be proud of being a descendant of the Assyrians. Just look at those beards and that hair. Although their aggressive imperialism, hopefully they're not proud of that, right? But still, it is an opportunity to celebrate, and celebrating is always fun, as well as to bless others, Orthodox blessings on the Assyrian side and Catholic ones on the Chaldean side. In pharaonic Egypt, the winter solstice was also celebrated. There, solar cults centered on Ra, and later, during the Hellenistic era, on Helios and Serapis, which expressed the idea of the sun's regeneration and of the life cycle resuming after the longest night of the year. And this probably inspired some aspects of the Greco-Roman celebrations of winter solstices. In Iran and Persia, the very ancient pre-Zoroastrian festival known as Yalda Night also coincided with the winter solstice. It honored the birth or triumph of the Indo-Iranian deity Mitra, and from the 6th century BC onwards, during the Zoroastrian period, Mitra became a divine being comparable in importance to an archangel, closely associated with light. It commemorated the power of radiance overcoming darkness, and included family gatherings, poetry readings, and the consumption of fruit. Priorities. Zoroastrianism, being the first ethical religion and the first large-scale monotheistic faith, yes, atheism came earlier, I know, but only for a very brief period, introduced a dualistic worldview in which the struggle between light and goodness, embodied by Ahura Mazda, the good god, and the forces of darkness, represented by Angra Mainyu, the literal personification of evil, created a universal ethical dualism. This light-darkness paradigm shaped many formulations of moral theology and festive symbolism, indirectly inspiring Christians during late antiquity regarding the birth of Jesus Christ as the birth of the true light, possibly through Roman Mithraism, a religion that was a radically different adaptation of the worship of the Indo-Iranian Mithra, but it retained the symbolism of light, the sun, salvation and goodness. And now we reach the most important celebration, the Roman Saturnalias, dedicated, unsurprisingly, to the god Saturn, the god of time, and one of the most joyful and significant festivals in the Roman calendar. Social hierarchies were suspended, gifts were exchanged, and banquets were held, evoking a golden age of abundance. Over time, the imperial cult of the Unconquered Sun was formalized on the 25th of December, which in Latin was the Natalis Solis Invicti, the day of the sun's rebirth. This explains why Christmas inherited solar elements, the exchange of gifts, and its domestic, joyful atmosphere. The birth of Christianity and the formation of its Christmas theology came with the consolidation of the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, the only ones that describe the birth of Jesus. Written with theological and symbolic purposes in mind, the Gospels present Christ as the fulfillment of messianic prophecy, combining angelic appearances and cosmic signs, such as the Star of Bethlehem, to express his divine nature and his mission to save humanity. Although Matthew and Luke do not mention a specific date, Jesus was most likely not born on the 25th of December. And it's the Bible itself that gives us several reasons to doubt that date. In Luke 2:1-3, a Roman census is mentioned, forcing Joseph and Mary to travel to Bethlehem. But Roman censuses were organized during more favorable seasons, not in the middle of winter, when rain and cold will make travel very difficult. Luke 2:8 also states that shepherds were spending the night outdoors, watching over their flock, something highly unlikely in December in Judea, when livestock was usually sheltered. And then comes the most complicated part, the account of Zechariah, the father of John. In Luke 1:5-9 and 1:23-24 allows us to reconstruct a chronology for the birth of John the Baptist, the one I'm named after, by the way. John comes from the biblical John. According to Luke 1:24, Zechariah belonged to the priestly division of Abijah, the seventh cause, which according to the Jewish calendar will place his service in late May or June. As stated in Luke 1:26 and 1:36, Jesus was conceived 6 months after John. 6 plus 9 gives us 15 months after June. This leads us to place the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, most likely between September and October, in autumn, not in winter. The fixing of the 25th of December as the official date of Christ's birth appears for the first time in the 4th century, in sources such as the Depositio Martyrum and the Chronographus Anni CCC LIV. This choice has been interpreted in two main ways, either as a symbolic synchronization with ancient solar festivals such as the Saturnalias or Sol Invictus, or as the result of theological calculations linking the incarnation to the spring equinox. But the former most definitely played an important role in the decision. And hey, I'm not saying that we should be celebrating his birthday on September and October. I mean, my birthday is the 19th of January, but for convenience, I will celebrate it a day earlier. If I'm willing to do that, who am I to question them? You know what I mean? The officialization of the Christian calendar allowed Christmas to become one of the main festivals of the Roman ritual cycle, uniting the celebration of the physical birth of Jesus Christ with the idea of light overcoming darkness, a reinterpretation of ancient solar motifs, adapting pre-existing traditions and redirecting them towards the new Christian message. As Christianity expanded northwards into Europe, it began to blend with older local traditions, reinforcing the winter character of Christmas. One of these was Yule, a Germanic and Norse festival celebrated at the winter solstice, centered on light, the rebirth of the sun, and communal feasting, where the community gathered to share food and drink, elements that would later be absorbed into Christmas celebrations. Another important tradition was the decoration with evergreen vegetation, plants that remain green all year, symbolizing life during winter, which would later inspire something very important: the Christmas tree. Even the Yule log, a large log burned as a ritual of fire and protection, influenced later Christmas customs, such as the hearth and the giving of gifts. And then in the islands of the Britannia, or the Painted Ones, fun fact, this is where the name of the British Isles comes from. And don't tell me that Britain comes from Britannia, I know, I'm explaining where Britannia itself comes from. There was the Anglo-Saxon celebration of Modranet, or Mother's Night. We know about this festival because it was described by Bede the Venerable, who did the best he could since these celebrations were technically prehistoric. It was a winter festival dedicated to honoring female deities of the household and fertility, with domestic rituals of light and family protection. When Christianity reached these regions, many of these customs were Christianized, transforming into veneration of the Virgin Mary. And although Modranet shares themes of light and home with Christmas, its direct influence on the Christmas traditions that we recognize today is fairly limited. It contributed more to preserving the idea of domestic rituals and family symbolism during winter at a local level than to the elements we now associate with Christmas, remaining as an Anglo-Saxon version of the winter solstice celebration, and not much more. In the end, the Christmas we know today emerged as a multicultural mosaic, in which elements from Middle Eastern religion, from Persia, Rome, and even Germanic traditions overlap, integrating ancient expressions of hope, protection, and joy around the winter solstice, brought together under a new Christian teaching that unified them. During the Middle Ages, the celebrations of Christmas became one of the most significant moments in Christian life. It was woven into both urban and rural society through solemn masses, processions, theatrical performances, and even musical celebrations, all of which sought to give a visible and accessible form to the mystery of God's incarnation as a man. This was reinforced by specific chants, such as the Latin hymns of the Divine Office, which gradually evolved into the carols of popular culture. These songs, spread by priests and parish choirs, marked the transition from monastic devotion into popular tradition, and a crucial moment for medieval Christmas came with the creation of the living nativity scene by Saint Francis of Assisi in Greccio in 1223. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. By recreating the birth of Christ with actors, animals, and a real setting, Francis sought to bring the divine mystery closer to everyday life. This transformed Christmas spirituality forever, orienting it towards compassion, poverty, tenderness, and the domestic sphere. Over time, the nativity scene became a central element of the visual representation of Jesus' birth throughout Europe. So thank you, Francis, for making it all more accessible. Around the same period, the winter tree, heir to ancient Germanic customs such as Yule, was reinterpreted in Christian terms as a symbol of the tree of life and of creation itself. Around it emerged seasonal and Christmas markets, where religious practice, commerce, and social life blended together. Medieval iconography, angels, shepherds, Mary and the Child, and the three wise men defined the visual models that still characterize the Nativity today. In this way, medieval Christmas became a fusion of ritual, an expression of a culture in which the sacred and the festive coexisted in harmony. And now that we're done with medieval Christmas, there is a truly incredible event from the modern era that I want to tell you about. In 1914, during a harsh winter of the First World War, and between the snow and artillery of the Western Front, soldiers, young men far from home and thrown into the horrors of war, did something truly extraordinary. On Christmas Eve, British and German soldiers emerged from the trenches, not to fight, but to make a momentary truce with the enemy against orders from superiors. And they celebrated, sang carols, exchanged tin food, cigarettes, chocolate, and even small gifts. Tokens of kindness that seemed almost impossible amidst the growing hatred of the war. Football matches were played in no man's land. Letters to loved ones were read aloud. Names and faces from home, softening the harsh reality around them. The truce didn't last very long, for the war soon resumed. The participants were told off by their superiors, punished, and humiliated in public for fraternizing with the enemy. That day proved the incredible power of such a celebration. For even against one of the worst wars in human history and supposed hatred of war, Christmas itself had the upper hand, because these soldiers, if only for a few hours, they were all friends. But we cannot go through this without talking about Santa Claus himself. Well, Saint Nicholas of Myra was a bishop of Lycia in the 4th century. In early Christian tradition, Nicholas was remembered for his compassion, his defense of the poor, and the many miracles attributed to him. Among the most famous stories is that of the 3 young women whom he rescued from poverty by secretly throwing bags of gold through a window, an act that established his reputation as a figure of anonymous generosity. And this Saint Nicholas, the inspiration behind our beloved Santa Claus, also showed a rather different side on one occasion. During the Council of Nicaea in 325, where the nature of Christ was debated against the Arian school of thought, Nicholas argued with Arius of Alexandria, the priest who promoted doctrines many considered contrary to official teaching, most notably denying that Jesus possessed the same divine nature as God the Father. According to later Byzantine legends, Nicholas became so outraged by Arius' words during the debate that in anger he smacked him in the face right there at the council. Well, if I were you, I really wouldn't want to be in the Nautilus right now. Now, it's worth noting that the smacking was not documented in contemporary sources. It emerged later through popular tradition and legend. Still, it's a story well worth telling. Over time, tales of Nicholas' courage and generosity emerged, transforming his image into that of a firm protector, capable of standing up to paganism and heresy, while also bringing gifts and comfort to those in need. Thus, behind the smiling Santa Claus that we know, stands a rather peculiar bishop. During the Middle Ages, the cult of Saint Nicholas spread across Europe, especially in port cities and commercial regions, where he was venerated as a protector of sailors and children. In the Netherlands, his devotion gave rise to Sinterklaas, a legendary bishop who arrived by ship from Spain to distribute gifts on the 6th of December. In Germany, he evolved into Christkind or Christkringle, bringing the custom of gift-giving closer to Christmas Eve. With European migration to the Americas, the character adapted to a Protestant and urban context. In 1823, the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, attributed to Clement Clark Moore, codified his modern portrayal, a cheerful traveler with a sleigh and reindeer, delivering toys through chimneys all over the world on the same day, somehow. A few decades later, the illustrations of cartoonist Thomas Nast in Harper's Weekly defined his physical appearance. Meanwhile, 20th century advertising introduced Santa Claus as a symbol of generosity and festive spirit, consolidating the modern image of Santa Claus as we know him today. And if we're going to talk about contemporary Christmas, let's start with the names we still use. Christmas comes from Christ Mass, the medieval English religious celebration of Jesus' birth. Navidad comes from Latin nativitas, which means birth, obviously that of Jesus. Santa Claus evolved from the Dutch Sinterklaas, itself a form of Saint Nicholas, brought to the United States by Dutch settlers and later globalized. And the more Latin Papa Noel comes from French Père Noël, Father Christmas, the Christmas version of Saint Nicholas popularized in France. Christmas iconography is a blend of symbols that evolved from the ancient world and into the modern era. The central motifs, the Star of Bethlehem, angels, shepherds, and the 3 wise men, Caspar, Melchior, and Balthasar, come from the Gospel narratives of Matthew and Luke, reinterpreted by early Christian and Byzantine art. Also, and this is important, in the original Greek version, it is never specified that the word 3 wise men, they are simply described as magi, a word that describes Persian or Babylonian wise men, with no numbers or names given. But well, they just decided to change whatever they felt like in the Bible. These elements served not only as symbolic tools for the less educated faithful, but also as visual affirmations of the mystery of the Incarnation and of prophetic fulfillment. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, painting and sculpture developed a stable iconography, Mary and the Child, animals, and the heavenly light, models that persisted through modern and romantic art and into popular tradition. Symbolic colors, green, red, and gold, were consolidated through art, green as a sign of eternal life, red as a symbol of sacrifice, and gold as a divine emblem. Christmas lights, originally candles placed on trees or in windows, expressed the victory of light over darkness. darkness. With the invention of electric lightning at the end of the 19th century, this practice transformed into a domestic and urban visual tradition, and today alternating current AC/DC, cheap and safe, allows millions of illuminated homes and cities to keep this tradition alive, a universal symbol of community and Christmas spirit. Thank you very much, Nikola Tesla. Without you, Christmas just wouldn't be the same. From the 19th century onwards, with the consolidation of the Victorian era, Christmas went through a social and cultural transformation. The British model, introduced by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, popularized customs such as the domestic Christmas tree, greeting cards, and the idea of a family-centered celebration. The rise of commerce, printing, and capitalism in general turned the Christmas season into a time of seasonal consumerism and emotional expression. During the last century, the expansion of American popular culture through cinema, advertising, and music universalized a more secularized image of the celebration, an even more capitalist one, where consumerism took priority over the religious connotation. And I'm not complaining at all because I'm working on Christmas Day and I am getting double pay for that. Christmas is natural selection. You can be the consumer or the seller. The choice is yours. The character of Santa Claus, luminous decorations, and the narrative power of American cinema, films like It's a Wonderful Life or Miracle on 34th Street, contributed to the globalization of a homogeneous Christmas culture, associated with prosperity and family. In Latin America, these forms blended with colonial traditions such as posadas and nativity scenes, while in Asia and Africa, the celebration took on a more commercial or touristic character, incorporating local elements, traditional dishes, lights, music, and adapting the Christmas spirit to local cultures. Thus, modern Christmas has become a hybrid global phenomenon, where the religious, the secular, the emotional, and even the commercial coexist perfectly. For one day, or two entire months, as in England, where some unhinged people start celebrating it on the 1st of December. And no, I'm not exaggerating, as a matter of fact, I am one of the culprits. Christmas gastronomy is a material reflection of the values that have intertwined in Europe and the Americas for more than a millennium. In medieval Europe, winter banquets, heirs to pagan celebrations and religious rituals, displayed abundance and gratitude for the harvest. With the colonial expansion and transatlantic exchanges, the culinary repertoire expanded. The American turkey replaced goose or pork in many European regions, while new ingredients such as cacao, or cocoa in English, sugarcane, and tropical fruits from the Spanish Americas, because obviously you cannot make a brownie or a hot chocolate without cocoa, am I right? The Italian panettone, Spanish turrón, English Christmas pudding, and the German spice biscuits, all of which contributed to the diversity and persistence of local traditions, and taken together, global Christmas cuisine embodies a shared and ever-changing heritage, the result of the intertwining of cultures and ingredients which, through the art of sharing a table with family and friends, perpetuate the warm and joyful meaning of the celebration, even after thousands and thousands of years. Therefore, Christmas is the greatest cultural crossover in human history. And Christmas, wonderful Christmas, doesn't belong to a single culture, state, or era. It is the result of thousands of years of humanity facing the same fears: the darkness, the winter, and the slow disappearance of the sun over the horizon, and the thousands of years of hope that the light will return, and simply that everything will be alright. The Sumerians watching the sun pausing its descent, the Persians celebrating the triumph of good over evil, the Romans toasting a new cycle, Christians announcing the birth of hope embodied in a man, modern families gathering under electric lights powered by alternating current, and Germanic-style decorated trees. The essential message has survived millenniums over millenniums later. Christmas is an unconscious agreement between generations. For a few days, weeks, or even months, we remember that sharing is important, that family, whether biological or chosen, deserve to receive a Merry Christmas or be visited, and that even during the winter solstice, the darkest moment of the entire year is when the incarnation of light and good itself is born. It's up to each one of you whether you want to call it the sun, Mitra, Christ, or just a family holiday. We do it because it's both our duty and right to celebrate that indeed everything's going to be alright. That's it. If you want to support the channel, just hype this video. If you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe, and if you want YouTube to let you know when a new one drops, you're gonna have to hit the bell icon. And all that's left to say is, happy day off, the sun is rising again. And also, Feliz Navidad and Merry Christmas, the birth of Christ, who is in essence exactly as divine as the Father and the Holy Spirit. So tell me, Saint Nicholas, I'm not on the naughty list, right? Ho ho ho. No, I'll let you off.